It was a sunny afternoon in the heart of the city, and the palace grounds were bustling with tourists. The grand building stood tall, its beautiful architecture shining under the clear blue sky. The royal guards, dressed in their red uniforms with tall black hats, stood like statues at their posts. Their faces were stone cold, never showing a hint of emotion. The crowds of visitors walked by, snapping pictures and marveling at the sight. Among the crowd was a young black boy named Jamal, who was visiting the palace with his family. Jamal had always dreamed of being part of something grand like this, but his life, like many others, wasn't always easy. He had faced challenges, and people often judged him by the color of his skin. Today, though, he was filled with excitement. He had never seen royal guards up close, and he couldn't stop staring at them. As Jamal walked alongside his mother and father, he marveled at the guards' stillness and discipline. He couldn't imagine how they could stand so straight for so long without moving. Jamal, though just a boy, understood that these guards were special. To him, they represented something much bigger, a sense of duty, honor, and control. Suddenly, there was a loud noise. Jamal's mother tripped on the stone path and fell hard on her ankle. She winced in pain, and Jamal rushed to her side. People around them quickly noticed, but no one stepped forward to help. Jamal tried to comfort his mother, but his small hands couldn't do much. The crowd grew uneasy, and some people seemed to look away, pretending they didn't see the family in distress. Jamal felt a lump in his throat. He hated feeling helpless, but today was different. As he looked around for someone to help, his eyes landed on one of the royal guards standing still by the gate. The guard's posture was as perfect as ever, but something in Jamal's eyes must have caught his attention. Without a moment's hesitation, the guard took a step forward, breaking his stoic posture for the first time. He walked over to Jamal and his mother, bending down with a surprising gentleness. "Are you all right?" the guard asked softly, breaking the silence. His voice, usually stern and commanding, was warm and caring now. Jamal was stunned. The guard's face, usually so serious, seemed softer as he helped lift Jamal's mother gently to her feet. The guard looked around, making sure no one else had stepped up to help, and then turned to Jamal. "You should be careful," he said kindly, looking at the boy. "Your mother needs some rest. I'll get her assistance." Jamal was speechless. He had seen the guards standing at attention, showing no emotion or compassion. But now, this man was not only offering help, but he also cared for someone like Jamal's mother, a stranger. Jamal felt a warmth spread through his chest. He had never felt so noticed, so valued. He had always been told that people like him didn't matter as much in the grand scheme of things, but this moment made him feel differently. As the royal guard signaled for someone to bring medical help, Jamal stood there, watching with a mix of awe and confusion. He was used to being ignored, being told he didn't belong. But now, here was someone who had never met him, treating him and his family with the kindness they deserved. The scene seemed to pause for a moment as Jamal took in the kindness of the guard. Little did he know, this act of compassion would be the beginning of something much bigger. As the royal guard continued to help Jamal's mother, other people in the crowd began to notice what was happening. The noise of the bustling crowd seemed to fade as everyone turned to look. Some people whispered to each other, surprised that a guard, who was supposed to remain still and silent, had broken his stance to help a stranger. Jamal's mother, though still wincing in pain, was overwhelmed by the guard's kindness. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking. She wasn't used to being treated with such care in public. Too often, people ignored her or looked the other way when things went wrong. "Don't worry," the guard replied. "We're here to help." His voice was reassuring, and his actions spoke even louder. He guided her carefully toward a nearby bench, making sure she didn't put any weight on her hurt ankle. He then signaled to a colleague, a fellow guard, to fetch the medical staff that was stationed nearby. Jamal watched all of this, his heart swelling with admiration. He had always been told that people like the royal guards were above everyone else, standing in the background, far removed from the lives of ordinary citizens. But now he saw something different. This guard was just like everyone else. He was a person, someone who cared enough to go beyond his duties and help. As they waited for the medical team to arrive, Jamal stood quietly beside his mother, feeling an unusual sense of hope. The guard, seeing how overwhelmed Jamal seemed, turned his attention to him. "You're a good son," the guard said, his eyes softening as he looked down at the young boy. "You're looking out for your mom. That's important." Jamal blinked, surprised by the compliment. He had never been told that he was doing something right. People often overlooked him and his actions, assuming he wasn't capable of much. But this man, this royal guard, saw something in him. It felt like a small victory. A few moments later, the medical team arrived, and Jamal's mother was carefully checked. They confirmed that her ankle wasn't broken, just sprained, and they wrapped it to help reduce the swelling. The guard stood quietly nearby, making sure everything went smoothly. Once the medical team had finished, he turned back to Jamal and his mother. "You'll be all right," he said gently. "It's important to rest for a few days, but you'll heal up just fine." He then smiled at Jamal's mother. "Take care of yourself," he added, before walking back to his post, returning to his stoic stance, as if nothing had happened. The crowd, which had been watching the scene unfold, seemed to react with a mix of admiration and surprise. It wasn't every day that a royal guard would break his composure to help someone, especially someone from the crowd. Jamal, still processing what had just occurred, felt a deep sense of gratitude. He looked at his mother, who was now sitting comfortably on the bench, feeling much better, and gave her a small smile. The guard's simple act of kindness had made all the difference. It had been a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures could have the greatest impact. Jamal now felt a new sense of pride and hope. It wasn't just about the kindness of a stranger. It was about the belief that people, no matter who they were, could stand up for what was right. Jamal and his mother, now feeling more at ease, stayed on the bench for a few minutes, watching the royal guards return to their positions. The usual stoic faces and uniformed postures were once again in place, but Jamal couldn't help but feel differently about them now. They were no longer just statues in fancy uniforms. They were people capable of deep compassion and action. His mother, still massaging her injured ankle, turned to Jamal with a soft smile. "You know," she said, "I've never seen anyone be so kind to us before. Not like that." Jamal nodded, still trying to process everything that had happened. He had seen royal guards standing outside palaces, always unapproachable, always strict. But today was different. Today, one of them had seen his mother in pain and chose to act. It was a quiet moment, but it meant a lot to both of them. Jamal had always been taught to mind his business and avoid conflicts, but that kindness from the guard had shown him that sometimes it was okay to speak up or take action when it was needed. Just then, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Are you two okay now?" It was the guard who had helped them earlier, now back to his duty. He had been watching them from a distance, and his concern had clearly not faded. He had a different look in his eyes now, one that showed empathy. Jamal's mother smiled again. "We're fine now, thanks to you," she said, still looking down at her foot. "I'll be careful with it." The guard nodded, then paused for a moment, clearly uncertain of what to say next. Jamal could see that, behind the guard's professional demeanor, he was still trying to find the right words. This was a different kind of encounter for him, one that required more than just the usual guard routine. "I hope you don't mind me asking," the guard said softly, "but how are you two doing, otherwise?" Jamal's mother looked up at him, surprised by the personal nature of the question. "We're doing okay," she replied with a small sigh. "It's been tough. You know, being out here, dealing with so much. But we manage." The guard nodded again, understanding more than Jamal had expected. His face softened, and there was a brief moment of silence between them, one that felt both warm and genuine. It wasn't the usual formality. It was the kind of conversation that could only happen when a person really cared about someone else. "Don't let anyone make you feel small," the guard said after a moment, his voice firm but kind. "You and your son deserve all the respect in the world. Don't forget that." Jamal blinked in surprise, looking up at the guard. The words weren't just encouraging. They were powerful. They weren't just words of kindness. They were a reminder that no one should ever be made to feel less than they were, no matter their circumstances. As the guard walked away to rejoin his post, Jamal sat quietly with his mother. Her ankle was still sore, but the pain seemed smaller now, as if the kindness they had received had softened it. Jamal felt a new sense of gratitude and strength. Today had changed something in him. He had witnessed firsthand how small acts of compassion could make a big difference in the world. The guard may have returned to his usual duties, but Jamal would always remember this moment. It wasn't just about the kindness of a stranger. It was about a moment of connection, of seeing each other as people, not just figures in uniforms or strangers on the street. As the day went on, Jamal and his mother stayed at the park for a while longer. The air was growing cooler as the evening drew near, but the warmth from the earlier kindness they had experienced still lingered in their hearts. Jamal couldn't stop thinking about the guard's words, how he had stood up for them, offering help and comfort when they needed it the most. His mother, although still resting her foot, seemed to be in a better mood now. She smiled more, even though she was still trying to take care of her ankle. Jamal had always seen her as a strong woman, someone who handled everything with grace, no matter how difficult things got. But today, he saw something new in her. She was still strong, but she was also more relaxed, as if the tension of the day had been lifted by the kindness they had received. "Jamal," his mother said as they sat together, "do you know what today has taught me?" He looked up at her, curious. "What's that, Mom?" She paused for a moment, her eyes thoughtful. "It's not just about kindness, Jamal. It's about standing up for what's right. Sometimes people don't see the hurt, the pain that others are going through. But when someone does stand up and help, even in small ways, it makes a difference. We don't have to fight or shout to be heard. Sometimes just showing kindness and understanding is the most powerful thing we can do." Jamal nodded slowly, taking in her words. He had always known his mother was wise, but today he felt like he was learning something new. The way she spoke about kindness and standing up for others made him think about all the times he had kept quiet or ignored someone's pain, unsure of how to help. He now realized that small actions, like the guard's kindness, could have a lasting impact on someone's life. After a while, Jamal stood up and stretched his legs. He felt the need to walk, to clear his mind and think more about what his mother had said. As they walked slowly through the park, Jamal saw the guard again. This time, he wasn't standing still or looking at the crowds. He was walking toward a group of children playing, smiling at them as they ran by. The guard's posture was relaxed now, as if the day had allowed him to be more himself. Jamal smiled to himself. He felt proud of the guard, not just because he had helped them earlier, but because he had shown that it was okay to be human. He had broken character for a moment, but in doing so, he had shown a side of himself that was compassionate and understanding. It was a reminder that people didn't need to always fit into a mold to be valuable. Everyone had their own story, their own moments of vulnerability. When the guard saw Jamal and his mother again, he gave them a small, knowing smile. This time, they didn't need to say anything. The connection they had shared earlier was enough. It was a silent understanding between two people who had come from different worlds, but had been brought together by a moment of kindness. As Jamal and his mother left the park that evening, the sounds of the city bustling around them, Jamal felt a sense of hope. The world wasn't perfect, but moments like these, small acts of kindness and understanding, could make all the difference. As Jamal and his mother left the park and headed home, the evening felt different from before. The weight of the earlier stress seemed lighter now, and the world outside seemed a little bit kinder. They walked quietly at first, both reflecting on the day's unexpected turns. Jamal felt a shift inside him, an understanding he hadn't had before. His mother, still walking slowly but with a stronger step, turned to him with a smile. "You know, Jamal," she began, "sometimes when we think things are going badly, life has a way of showing us there's kindness and goodness still in the world." Jamal nodded. He had been thinking about what the guard had done, the way he had broken character, leaving his post to help them when no one else seemed to care. It had made him feel as though someone was really paying attention. Jamal realized that kindness didn't have to come from someone you knew. It could come from a stranger who took the time to show compassion. "You're right, Mom," Jamal said. "Sometimes it feels like people just go through life not noticing anyone else. But today, it was different. The guard, he really helped us. And it made me feel seen, like we matter." His mother's smile widened. "Exactly, Jamal. And that's something we must always remember. People matter. Our story, our feelings, everything we go through, it matters. Sometimes people forget that." As they walked a little further, Jamal noticed something. The world around him seemed a bit brighter now. Maybe it was the sunlight catching the edges of the buildings, or the laughter of a couple of kids playing on the street. But it felt like something inside him had shifted, and for the first time in a while, he felt more connected to the world. It was as if he had witnessed something bigger today, something that gave him a fresh perspective. As they reached their home, Jamal's thoughts kept circling back to the guard. He hadn't just helped them in a moment of need. He had shown Jamal a new way of looking at the world. The world wasn't always fair, and people weren't always kind, but it was still possible to make a difference. Small acts of compassion could ripple out, changing the course of someone's day, or even their life. When they got inside, Jamal sat at the kitchen table while his mother made them a cup of tea. He thought about how different their lives could have been had they not met that guard, had they not shared that brief but impactful moment together. It felt like fate had intervened, nudging them in the direction of something better. "Mom," Jamal said as she sat across from him with her tea, "do you think things can really change? I mean, after all we've been through, can the world really get better?" His mother looked at him thoughtfully, taking a sip of her tea before answering. "The world is always changing, Jamal. Sometimes it changes slowly, and sometimes it feels like nothing is changing at all. But I believe that every small act of kindness, every time we stand up for what's right, helps to make the world a little better." Jamal smiled, feeling a little more at peace with the world. The road ahead was still long, but now he understood something he hadn't before. Kindness was a force that could change everything. And no matter how small or quiet it seemed, it had the power to make a difference, not only in his life, but in the lives of others. That night, as Jamal lay in bed, he thought back to the guard, the man who had taken the time to show kindness when it was needed most. He was just one person, but his actions had changed Jamal's perspective forever. And for that, Jamal was grateful. The world might not always be fair, but he knew that kindness, when shared, was a force that could never be underestimated. The next few days felt like they were unfolding differently for Jamal and his mother. They had always lived in a world that seemed to push them to the edges, where people often ignored them or judged them based on things they couldn't change. But after the encounter with the guard, things felt lighter, more hopeful. Jamal started to believe in the power of small, everyday acts of kindness, even if they came from strangers. Jamal woke up early one morning, eager to start his day. His mother was already in the kitchen, humming a soft tune as she made breakfast. The usual stress of the week had softened, and the house felt peaceful. Jamal couldn't help but smile as he walked to the kitchen. The events of the past week had changed him, made him see the world through a different lens. "Good morning, son," his mother greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning, Mom," Jamal replied. He sat down at the kitchen table, his mind racing with thoughts of what had happened the other day. "You know, I've been thinking about that guard again," Jamal began. "How he helped us, even when it wasn't part of his job. His mother paused for a moment, placing a cup of coffee in front of him. "You know, Jamal, sometimes the world doesn't show us kindness, but when it does, it changes everything. It reminds us that we don't have to be perfect to make a difference, and you don't have to be anyone special to show kindness to others." Jamal nodded, remembering how the guard had helped them without hesitation. The simple act had shown Jamal that there was still good in the world, even when things seemed hard. After breakfast, Jamal and his mother decided to go out for a walk. It was a beautiful morning, the sun shining bright, and the air cool. They strolled through the park, enjoying the peacefulness of the day. As they walked, Jamal noticed something he hadn't paid attention to before. People around him, whether they were strangers or familiar faces, seemed more open, more connected. He smiled at a passing woman, who smiled back. A man walking his dog gave a friendly wave, and Jamal waved back. Jamal was realizing something important. Kindness was contagious. The more he looked for it, the more he saw it around him. The guard's simple act of compassion had started a ripple effect in his life. It was a quiet, powerful reminder that people mattered. Their struggles, their feelings, their dreams, everything about them mattered. As they continued walking, Jamal noticed a few other moments of kindness. A young woman helped an older man pick up his dropped groceries. A couple walked by with their young daughter, all smiling and laughing together. Jamal felt a deep sense of peace. The world, for all its flaws, was still full of good people doing good things, and the more he opened his eyes to it, the more he saw. "Mom," Jamal said as they walked, "I think we're starting to see the good in the world. It's not always easy to find, but when we do, it feels like a little bit of hope shines through." His mother smiled at him, proud of the person he was becoming. "Yes, son. Hope is always there, even in the toughest times. We just have to look for it." The rest of the day was filled with small, simple joys. Jamal had a new perspective on life, and he wanted to share that with others. He was no longer looking at the world with cynicism or doubt. Instead, he was seeing the beauty in the little things, kind words, small gestures, and the kindness that people showed, often when they least expected it. When they returned home, Jamal felt like he had found a new sense of purpose. It wasn't about grand gestures or big acts of heroism. It was about showing kindness when it was needed, helping someone when they were down, and standing up for what was right. He felt inspired, ready to take on whatever came next with an open heart. That night, as Jamal lay in bed, he smiled to himself. He was starting to understand what truly mattered. The world could be a tough place, but kindness could always break through, no matter how thick the walls of injustice or hardship seemed. And in that moment, Jamal knew that he had the power to help others find that kindness, just like the guard had helped him. Days turned into weeks, and Jamal continued to feel the shift in his life. His thoughts were clearer, his heart lighter. He had learned so much from the encounter with the Royal Guard, but what mattered most was the way that experience had shaped him. He had seen how one simple act of kindness could change a moment, a day, or even a life. It was a lesson that would stay with him forever. Jamal and his mother had started going out more often, walking through the town, talking to neighbors, and getting to know the people around them. Every time they went out, Jamal looked for the small moments of kindness that so often went unnoticed, and every time he found them. Whether it was a person helping another pick up something they had dropped, or a friendly smile exchanged between strangers, kindness was everywhere. One afternoon, as they walked through the market, Jamal noticed a young girl standing alone, looking lost. Her parents were nowhere in sight. She was staring at a candy stand, but it was clear that she wasn't paying attention to where she was standing. The crowd was busy, and no one seemed to notice her. Without thinking, Jamal walked up to her. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked gently. The girl looked up, startled, then nodded. "I'm looking for my mom," she said in a small voice. "I lost her." Jamal immediately felt a surge of responsibility. He knew what it felt like to be lost, to feel alone, and he wasn't about to let this girl experience that fear. He took her hand and looked around. "Let's go find her together," Jamal said with a reassuring smile. The two of them walked around the market, asking vendors and people in the crowd if they had seen the girl's mom. It didn't take long before a woman, clearly worried, rushed toward them. She was the girl's mother. When she saw her daughter with Jamal, she immediately thanked him. "Thank you so much for helping her," the woman said, relief flooding her face. "I was getting so worried." Jamal smiled, feeling proud of what he had done. "No problem," he said. "I'm just glad I could help." As Jamal walked away with his mother, he realized something important. That moment, the one where he stepped in to help a stranger, was a direct result of the kindness he had witnessed from the guard weeks earlier. The kindness he had been shown was now flowing through him, and he was passing it on to someone else. Later that day, as they sat together at home, Jamal's mother spoke up. "I saw what you did today," she said, her voice warm. "You helped that little girl because you remembered what someone did for us." Jamal nodded, his heart full. "I never really thought about it that way," he admitted. "But I guess it's true. I saw how much that guard's kindness changed things for us, and I wanted to do the same for someone else." His mother smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's how change happens, Jamal. It starts with one person, and then it spreads." Jamal realized that the ripple effect of kindness could never be underestimated. The small act of a royal guard helping his mother had turned into something much bigger, a lesson that he would carry forward. Every day, Jamal made a conscious effort to spread kindness wherever he went. Whether it was helping a friend, showing compassion to a stranger, or simply being patient with others, he was now someone who valued kindness in every moment. And slowly the people around him began to change too. He noticed that when he showed kindness, others seemed to respond in kind. The world, while far from perfect, was starting to feel like a place where good things could happen. And Jamal knew that as long as he continued to pass on the kindness he had been given, the world would continue to improve, one small act at a time. That night, Jamal lay in bed, feeling proud of the person he was becoming. His journey had only just begun, but he knew that kindness was the path he wanted to walk. The ripple effect of a single act of kindness had created a lasting impact, and he would make sure to keep it going.